All right, the time is 5:30. I'm going to call the Committee of the Whole for January 27th, 2025 to order. Clerk Boak, can you do the roll?
Councilmember Brown?
Present.
Councilmember Spatafor?
Present.
Councilmember Carter?
Here.
Councilmember Pelivanoglu?
Present.
Councilmember Garza?
Here.
Councilmember Cost?
Here.
Councilmember Hussein?
Here.
Councilmember Jackson? 8 members present.
Thank you. We're on to the minutes. Vice President Carter.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the January 13th, 2025 minutes as presented.
We have a proper motion in place. Are there any questions or concerns? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Passes unanimously. Next, we are on to public comment on agenda items. Is anyone here from the public that wishes to speak? You'll have up to 3 minutes. And can you please state your name for the record? Any takers? Seeing none, we're going to move on to item 5, presentations. The first one is going to be the City of Lansing Annual Audit Fiscal Year ending 6/30/24 by Manor. We have some folks here in the crowd here to present for us. If they want to come up front, take a seat. It's fine. Yep. Good evening. All right, if you want to make sure your green light is on, and I will, we've done this 3 years now, so I'll hand the floor over to you.
Sounds good. Well, good afternoon, good evening. I am Bill Tucker from Maynard Costerison. With me today, I have Tyler Baker from Maynard Costerison as well. We're here tonight to present to you the audited financial statements from June 30th, 2024. Before I get started, I'll just kind of walk through the information that was handed out to you tonight, and then we'll get into the audit presentation itself. So the first document that I would like to hold up in front of you, everybody did receive this in their packet, but we did hand out hard copies of this today as well to you, is the bound financial statements. So within this large document, you'll find all the necessary financial statements and note disclosures to be in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Also within this document, you'll find the independent auditor's report that provides our opinion on these financial statements. So all that's in this large bound report for you. We also did put together an audit presentation outline for you tonight. So we'll go page by page by page through this document. We've pulled items out of the financial statements, also included a couple graphs and charts for you as well. So we'll go through this document in some detail. So the first page in the audit presentation outline is an overview of the independent auditor's report. The purpose of an audit is to provide opinion as to the fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. It's not to detect fraud, and it's not to give you an opinion on your internal controls. Within the independent auditor's reports, we provide our opinion on your financial statements. We're actually giving our opinion on the 9 opinion units of the city. Those 9 opinion units are the governmental activities, the business type activities, the aggregate discretely presented component units, each major fund, in which there's 5 major funds in 2024, the general fund, the state and federal grant fund, the public safety capital project fund, the sewage disposal system fund, the municipal parking system fund, and then the last opinion units is the aggregate remaining fund information. So we're providing unmodified or clean opinions on all 9 of those opinion units, and an unmodified clean opinion is the best opinion you can receive on your financial statements, meaning that everything is presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. All right. From there, we'll turn to the very next page in the document. The next page that you're turning to is your Certificate of Achievements for Excellence in Financial Reporting they received for your June 30th, 2023 financial statements. The City of Lansing has been submitting their financial statements for this award of excellence for a number of years. And again, in 2024, you're submitting for that award, but this is just showing that award from the previous year as well. The next 2 pages that we have for you in the audit presentation outline is the statement of net position. The statement of net position is a snapshot of your assets, deferred outflows of resources, liabilities, deferred inflows resources, and net position at June 30th, 2024. The statement of net position is presented on the full accrual basis of accounting. So this includes all of your capital assets, long-term obligations, net other post-employment benefits liability, and net pension liability. These statements, page 27, 28, and then also 29 of the financial statements are your government-wide financial statements that combine all the activities of the city into a couple different pages or different columns, so you can see all the information on that full accrual presentation statement. I have highlighted a couple different numbers on the next page, page 28 for you, that we'll talk about on the next couple charts. So the 2 numbers I've highlighted for you are the net pension liability, which the total column is about $378 million, and your net other post-employment benefits liability of about $209 million. I've highlighted those 2 so we could get into the details of both of those on the next couple pages. So the next couple pages I'll be referring to relate to that net pension liability for the city. The first one that we'll be talking about is page 122, which is your defined benefit pension plan for your employee retirement system. As we look at this schedule, we look at that far left column, which is for June 30th, 2024. We see net pension liability, the 4th number up from the bottom in that far left column, of $146 million for this pension plan. And you see that next number down that's currently funded at about 53% funded. You can see the trends for that over the last 10 years as well, where it stayed pretty stable over those 10 years, being in that 50% range. The next pension plan that we have for you on the next page, this is a page 125 of the statements, relates to your police and fire retirement system. Again, looking at that far left column, this net pension liability for this plan sits at just under $232 million, and that is funded a little bit more than the previous one, but it's close to about 57% funded at June 30th. The next 2 pages relate to your net other post-employment benefit obligation. So again, we do have the 2 different schedules for you on these next 2 pages. So the first one is on page 131, relates to your employee retirement system, and that net other post-employment benefit liability sits at about just over $45 million. That's funded at about 51%. Again, you can see those trends over the last 8 years at this point in time. So you've continually funded that. So you started off about 23%, you're about 51% as of 2024. And the last chart for your net other post-employment benefits liability relates to your police and fire retirement system. That OPEB liability is just over $151 million, or about 28% funded. Right. From there, I'm going to turn over to Tyler. He's going to go over the next couple pages on your fund financial statements.
Good evening. Let me turn this a little bit for you. So what we're going to go over now is some of the governmental fund information. So this information is a little bit more like what you're used to seeing. So this is on the modified accrual basis. And so this is what you would be seeing in your monthly financials and when you're looking at budget, in contrast to a bills. So items of long-term nature, capital asset, debt would not be shown on this balance sheet. And so what we're going to look at is that left column highlighted, which is your general fund. The city had three major funds, as Bill noted earlier: the general fund, the state and federal grants, special revenue fund, and then the public safety capital projects. And we're going to be focusing on the general, which is that left column. At the bottom, you can see the general fund as of 6/30 of 24 had a total fund balance of just over $40.6 million. Netted out of the non-spendable, restricted, and committed is an unassigned fund balance, or to be used for future expenditures, of just over $31.3 million, or approximately 20% of your annual operating expenses. In comparison, the prior year was 14%. So from year over year, went from 14 to 20% of that unrestricted fund balance in comparison to expenditures. Our recommendation and other agencies' recommendations is in that 15 to 20% minimum unassigned fund balance, which you guys are at. So. Next page is the income statement, or the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. So this is for the entire fiscal year. On that left column, again, the general fund. Total revenues, about a third of the way down, was $166.8 million in the current year, or up approximately $4 million, or 2.4% year over year. Some of that is due to increases in tax bases, as well as income taxes, netted with a change in ARPA recognition in that intergovernmental line item also, for that net increase of approximately $4 million from the prior year. Total expenditures, halfway down the page, just over $155 million, which is up approximately $5.5 million, or 3.5%. The majority driver of that is just increase in wages, an increase in FTE year over year make up the majority of that increase. Net change in fund balance at the bottom there shows a year over year increase of just under $11 million for the general fund for the current year, increasing that fund balance from just under $30 million to just over $40 million as of 6/30 of 24. The next page, or the next couple pages, we have some trends and graphs to show you here. So the next page is the general fund's total revenues, expenditures, and fund balance over the last 5 years. You can see this 5-year analysis with 4 of the last 5 years having revenues exceeding expenditures, which is the general trend in which you would like to see. With that controlled growth in revenues, with matching expenditures for the majority of those years. So the general trend in which governance would like to see. The next page is as of 2024, kind of how the revenue and expenses are the next two slides, where the money comes from and where the money goes for the general fund specifically. And so this first one is revenues and other financing sources. You can see on the right side of that pie chart, the blue and the red segments, blue being property taxes, red being income taxes, are approximately 57% of total revenues being derived by those two revenue sources, with property taxes and income taxes. So just showing that the city overall for that general fund is heavily dictated by the tax base, by millage, and by property tax, and by the income taxes. Prior year in regards to that was 53% also, so which you would anticipate with that increase in tax base. Total expenditures and other financing uses, that red segment being public safety, at approximately 58%. So the vast majority of expenditures in the general fund relate to public safety. Prior year was 58%, so overall consistent percentages as you would compare year over year for those segments. The next couple pages are our independent auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting. So as we walk through our processes and review the different processes and procedures at the city. If anything comes to our attention that would be required or we feel should be communicated to the board, it would go in this letter. And so I'm not going to read each one individually to you, but I am going to give an overview of each of them. They are the same or similar findings to the prior year, which are material weakness for material journal entries, significant deficiencies over the payroll process, and lack of documentation, and then a compliance finding for unfavorable budget variances for the general fund and some of the special revenue funds. Overall, pretty consistent. If you remember, 3 years ago, there was a couple more. Last year, same number of findings as these three. But as you go through, there is some wording tweaks to show improvement that the city has been making, but we feel still is represented in these material weaknesses and then the significant deficiency for the payroll process. As the city continues to implement the new software, I think there's an opportunity that some of these could be addressed with processes changes and looking at. So, but I think overall, these three findings were consistent with the prior year overall. So, any questions on this report before I go through the governance letter?
I'm actually going to have the internal auditor. I think you have an attached overview as well, if you want to go through that. And then we'll take questions.
Well, it was really just reiterating what was said by the external auditors, in addition to there were disclosures made to the state regarding the status of various qualifications that the city was in compliance with throughout the year. And again, just noting that there is audit findings as well as last year, and that there's same audit findings. However, I understand that there's improvements being done on those as well.
And with those reports too, they're due, we didn't mention, but they are due 6 months after year end. So they're due with your fiscal year end of 6/30, due 12/31, and all of those required reports and state filings were submitted before that 12/31 deadline, along with the financial statement audit is the single audit. So that's a separate compliance audit that, because you guys expend a certain dollar amount of those federal awards, you're required to have an additional compliance audit under uniform guidance. And so we're in the process of working through that right now. And as it currently stands, I would expect you guys should have that final report and submitted by the end of February. And that's due March 31st, so in plenty of time for that deadline from that standpoint, which is consistent with previous years overall. So.
I have Councilman Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this could be a question for anyone, but looking at page 17 out of 100, you mentioned that it's a positive trend that we like to see, where it's favorable, that there's more revenue coming in and less expenditures. My question is, does your report or any report account for the other revenue source of the CARES Act and the funding that was given to the city on a one-time basis? Because from 2020 to 2024 that we're looking at would cover pretty much that whole time, and I just wondered if anything accounted for that. And if that wasn't there, would that revenue be a lot shorter than the expenditures?
Yeah. So a couple different things to answer your question. So the revenue for the ARPA money that was received, as part of that single audit compliance work that we're doing. So those dollars, are kind of part of that federal resources that you've received and part of those compliance requirements for the single audit. So we do kind of go through and evaluate those dollars as part of the single audit. and the dollars there. As for the revenue that's been received, so a lot of that in previous years was going into your states and federal grants revenue. So it was actually not going into the general fund category. It was actually in your state and federal grants fund, so a little bit different funding source or revenue recognition for those in previous years.
And I guess just for the final answer, is it accounted for where it's going to be does this whole report account for that money, or does it not account for that money?
So it accounts for that money. It also, in previous years, you've recognized the revenue as well. So it would account for portions of that revenue that you've received, where you've recognized some of that in prior years as well.
So page 32 of the, I guess both reports, but at the bottom shows the balance sheet. And so those funds were received up ahead of time, up front. And so because they're restricted dollars, expenditures are required to be incurred before that revenue can be recognized. And so as it was recognized over the last 3 or 4 years, revenues and expenses have agreed. As you see, that state and federal grants fund balance is zero because expenditures and revenues net to zero. In the middle of that, you can see unearned revenue as of 6/30 of 24 of just over 23 million. A large amount of that is the remainder, or some of that dollar is the remainder of the ARPA funds that will be recognized in fiscal year 25 and will be the end of the ARPA grants after the last 5 years of recognizing those. A large majority over the years have been recognized in that state and federal grants, and if any expenditures were for other departments or other funds, those would have then been moved over into those and recognized in those other funds. But again, matching those revenues and expenditures. And so if there were one-time fundings, it theoretically wouldn't have an impact on the fund balance because revenues and expenses net to zero. That clarifies it a little bit.
Like mud.
Perfect.
All right, I've got Councilman Spatafor.
Sure. Thank you for being here this evening. It's a question that maybe it's better directed at our finance team, but I'll throw it out. I see in the public safety capital projects on page 32. Well, you turn to the text. Wrong page. 34. $6.2 million in interest and $4.6 million in expenditures. So still a excess of revenue in the public safety bonds of $1.5 million. Are we, I don't know, I know enough about arbitrage to be dangerous, but not enough to be actually informed. So are we at any risk of arbitrage there, or are we still fine?
So yes, we're earning quite a bit of money on that $175 million. Right now, we're still fine.
Okay.
And so we have some time, but we are always looking at it and are aware of the arbitrage
Okay.
Requirements.
Thank you.
All right, I've got Councilman Garza.
Thank you, President Cost. On page 2 of this, what you just went over with, it says corrective action response. It says within budget constraints, management will look to increase staffing levels and or obtain temporary assistance earlier in the fiscal year, both within the finance department as well as other key departments. Are any of those positions, out of the 120 plus vacancies, are any of those positions currently online, available, trying to seek those positions? Are they?
Well, I can just speak from the finance department right now and get back with you, Councilman. Finance department is fully staffed, and so we don't have any, yeah, maybe I did ask for a position. I need to probably get back with you on that answer to do a little bit more research on that. All right, thank you.
All right, seeing no more. Oh, yes, internal auditor.
Thank you, President Cost. I just wanted to circle back on these internal control issues. And I know it's a repeat from last year, and we have our corrective action plans. I wanted your input as far as how we're progressing on these corrective action plans from prior year.
So we have made with the new BSNA system being in place, I think we're going to see even more controls and efficiencies in place to where hopefully a couple more of these will fall off and we don't gain any new ones, because we are always conscious about, making sure things are done timely. So with the payroll, with the new payroll system in place, we should be able to have review payroll before it's processed and making sure that it's signed off on before checks are issued. That's one of the biggest things. The material journal entries, again, making sure we get the information from the other departments in a timely basis so that we can make those updates or adjustments that are needed within those systems. With our BSNA, we're seeing way more efficiencies. It's not taking us nowhere near the time it did when we had Finance Enterprise with Excel spreadsheets and all this other stuff that we had to put together just to make sure everything balanced. So I think we're going to see even more efficiencies once we get fully operational through our BSNA system.
Thank you, and I had a question back to the auditors. These retirement funding percentages, are those in line with what you've seen at other cities as well? Is it high, low? What's
So
your
if we
opinion
kind
on
of look at
this?
the average across the state, if we kind of went back to the two different ones, so let me get to my schedule here. I did write down my state averages before I came tonight. So if we looked at, the state of Michigan does have a report that they have out there where you can kind of go through and sort through all the different pension and OPEB plans throughout the entire state. So it kind of gives you a good idea of where everybody else stands. If we looked at just the statewide average for pension, the pension funding calculation or percentage that they're funded at is about 73%. So you guys are at, 53 for one and 57 for the other, so below that average. And then if we went over to the other post-employment benefits, that actually trend has, definitely continued to rise across the state. So if we looked at that 6 or 7 years ago, it would probably been close to 0 to 10% funded. Now it's at about 71% funded across the state. So we do see a lot of other post-employment benefit plans where they've made changes to their benefits over the years. So they may have gone from, a lot of those are overfunded plans across the state. So we still have a lot that are, lower percentages, and then it's kind of a weird trend there where you see some that are in excess of 100%, and then a lot that are below, 30, 40%. But average 71, sorry.
And just to piggyback off of that, and this might not be a question for you, this might be for finance, is that, was it a $12 million grant for our retirement system? Is that included in this report?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Page 122, right in the middle, you can see that contribution state grant of 11.6.
Okay. And then the second question I have to piggyback on the other thing, the three findings. So I went back this weekend and watched this meeting in reverse last year and the year before. And I appreciate that you aren't making any promises of when it's going to get fixed, because there was a lot of guarantees then. But if we're going to talk realistically, do you have a time frame where we might see these actually drop off as findings?
No, I do not. I will tell you that we keep working very hard. This is the controller, other staff people, finance department's working really, really hard to make sure we don't have audit findings, not add anything to the list, but working hard to eliminate the findings also. And working across departments, because we rely on other departments to give us information also and get that information timely. So we are meeting with them throughout the fiscal year, so we're not waiting till the last minute. They are aware of the audit findings. We're going through the audit findings with the other departments so that they know what we're facing and say, what can we do to make these audit findings go away?
If possible, if we could get updates on the progress that we're making throughout the year, maybe quarterly updates, and even bring you back down here for a discussion if need be, to try to figure out how we can solve these, because, it'd be good to see one of these reports without those findings.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to hand it back to you.
The last letter we'd like to go through, and I know there's a lot of paper, so if you don't find it, that's okay. I can go over the overview. But it's a letter here, 2 or 3 pages long. At the top, it talks about qualitative aspects of accounting practices. This would have been just inside the first cover of the large bound report. So what this is known as our governance letter. This is required communication from the auditors to governance. The first page, what it talks about is estimates that are included within the financials. These would include items like the pension liability, like the OPEB liability. This just discloses what those estimates included in the financial statements are to governance. Page 2 continues on those estimates. Middle of the page, it talks about difficulties encountered in performing the audit, any uncorrected misstatements or disagreements through the audit process. Thanks to Desiree and her team, we didn't have any disagreements with management. We didn't have any difficulties performing the audit. So from that standpoint, this is a boilerplate or clean governance letter to you all, and so which is exactly what you would like to see, but again, still required for us to kind of go over that with you guys. So I'll let you read that tonight.
Any questions? Appears not. All right, well, I appreciate all of you coming. Actually, you're going to stay here for the next item, I believe. So then we will move on to item C, the LEFA financial statements, year-end 6/30/2024. And we have the same folks presenting. Thank you from the folks at the Finance Department for coming. Floor is yours.
Thank you. So within that, included in just under that first flap of the bond report, you should see this graph with the blue, green, and we'll call that purple columns here. So this is just a 5-year trend on LEPFA, which is what we'll go over today. And then if you have any other specific questions, we can answer them. Last Tuesday, we did a full presentation to the board, some of which the city management was at that presentation, and so we did a full presentation to them. And today I'm here to give you kind of an update on what changes from 23 to 24. They're a 6/30 year end, and so we'll talk about some of that. We'll look at some trends, and then I can answer any potential questions you guys have. So similar to the city, LEPFA had an unmodified or a clean audit opinion, which is us stating that the financials are in accordance with GAAP. Piggybacking off on what Bill went through all on the city presentation. So again, consistent with last year and previous years, but we did place an unmodified opinion on those opinion units. In the current year, there were 2 findings in regards to LEPFA. We had a material weakness for audit journal entries, and then a compliance finding in regards to sales tax remittance to the state. So that was a matter of timeliness of remitting those sales taxes to the state. So in the current year, we had those 2 in comparison to the prior year. 2 findings we had in the prior year fell off because of decisions within management that they made to rectify those, one of which was bank rec timeliness and review. In the current year, we walked through that process, and the month that we selected for that process, they had corrected that, so that finding fell off. And then in the prior year, there was also credit card activity review and backup. That in the current year, those such receipts and processes were being followed as they stated that their processes were. So just kind of a recap from last year to this year in regards to the findings. Going over the trend graph here, you can see over the 5 years, specifically looking from 21 to 24, as you can see, 2020 was still fairly elevated as the majority of the year was pre-shutdown. And then you can see that large downtick in 2021, and then that steady increase as events and activities continued to open up. You can see that the trend over those 4 years, specifically revenue and expenditures, continued to increase. So what we're looking at is total revenue, which would include their operating revenues as well as city and the Visitors Bureau contribution as well. So this would be total revenue, and then your total operating expenses are green. The purple is the unrestricted net position, and so within net position of LEPFA includes capital assets and debt. And so because those expenditures have already been spoken for, unrestricted would be what can be used for future needs. And starting in 2021 was 15% of expenditures, 2022 was 25, 2023 was 33, and 24 was 37%. So you can see that uptick year over year over the last 4 years of that unrestricted net position. Specifically from 23 to 24, operating revenues in 23 was 6.5 million. And 24 was 7.4, or approximately $1 million increase. Majority of that is due to increase in food sales from the operation side. There's some other fluctuations between increase in interest revenue, things like that you would anticipate with increase in treasury rates. Majority due to food sales increases. In regards to expenditures, you have similar increase to the food cost as food revenue increases. Obviously, there's a higher need for food, so you had an increase in those food costs, and then slight increases in repair and maintenance and utilities. Repair and maintenance increase as improvements were made in the current year, revolving around just under $2 million in grant that was recognized for the Lansing Center improvements and then Jackson Field improvements. There was repair and maintenance related upgrades that didn't necessarily fall under a capital outlay or a capital asset threshold, which is why you had a lot of that increase in the repair and maintenance on the expense side. One thing new from last year to this year, as I mentioned, is that grant. And so of the amount received, there was $2 million expended in the current year in regards to those state grants. Because those are restricted, the revenue would be recognized as those expenses are incur, similar to ARPA, as we mentioned, for the city. Any questions on LEPFA?
Internal auditor.
I noticed we don't have management here. However, can you go back to the issues that were noted? I was just wondering if these are sort of one-off type activities, or are they recurring? Do you expect them to occur this year, next year, maybe?
So I don't remember 2 years ago, but the material weakness last year was on, some due to transition in the finance office. And then obviously last year to this year, the same finding. The sales tax remittance is a new one. And so I do think that can be corrected with timely remittance. And that had the reason for the finding as of 6/30 had been remitted. So as long as obviously that continues to be remitted timely, that would be the steps to remove that as a finding. And then as I noted, the two additional ones last year that we had being corrected for this year.
So the material journal entries, I know the city, they're more or less the same journal entries year over year. This one, is this the same journal entries occurring, or are they different related topics?
I do believe there was some carryover, but a lot of the material journal entries this year revolved around the grant, that new grant and the recognition of that grant and the application to the capital assets that it involved, as well as deferred revenue, with keeping that deferred revenue on the balance sheet until it's earned, and then the recognition of that revenue and expenditure on the income statement. So a lot of the material weakness did flow because of that grant, and then there was some additional entries through the audit inquiry and things like that. So,
So very technical
yes.
journal entries that
Yes.
I probably wouldn't be able to do, but you could. Thank you.
Yep.
Is there any other questions? All right, seeing none, then we will thank both of you for being here, and we are going to move on to our next item.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. The next item is going to be an update on the Ovation project. I believe we have Emily here from the Ovation and Roy.
We also have some folks from Dynaxium Development here as well.
I want to thank you for being here. And then if the folks from Dymaxium could just state their names for the record when they speak. Looks like we have a presentation, so if you, I'm not sure who's presenting the presentation.
I have the clicker, so.
You have the clicker. All right, then the floor is yours.
Okay, perfect. Is it up on the screen? Perfect. Thanks, Faith. So we are here for our quarterly update for the Ovation project. So I'm from the Lansing Public Media Authority. We have Roy from the City of Lansing, and then a couple folks from Dymaxium Development who will be sharing some updates also. Also good to see everyone. So first, back in September, we unveiled some new designs with our architect, Albert Kahn. I put that in here just because I know some of the old designs are still circulating, so this is the beautiful new building that will be being built. So first, we just have a brief overview of the project. So I'm sure you all know this, but construction of a 75,766 square foot concert venue with an approximately 2,000 person seating capacity. These new designs do include a black box theater along with the main performance space, and we are working on procuring a restaurant partner for the third floor restaurant build out. So hopefully we'll have more information to share there soon. And then I'll throw it over to Brendan from Dymaxium for this slide.
Thank you, Emily. My name is Brendan Fox. I'm with Dymaxium Development. And this is Jeff with Dymaxium Development as well. As Emily mentioned, we've been hard at work working through the design phase of the Ovation project. The primary goal of the team here has been to garner as much progress as humanly possible as Albert Kahn completes both the programming phase as well as the schematic design phase and the design development phase. During this time, we've completed the general demolition work, the asbestos abatement work, as well as painted a very nice mural on the south face of the building. During that time period, Albert Kahn, as I mentioned, progressed through the primary design phases. We've taken a comprehensive approach to maximize the efficiency with design as much as we possibly can. We made a decision to kind of prioritize the sets for the 520 South Washington building, which have since been submitted to the building department for plan review. Comments have been received back, and there's back and forth between the architecture team and the City of Lansing building department working through those. So we're excited to get the build out within the 520 building specifically rolling here in the very near future. With the project being in the design phase, budget has been constantly tracked with all milestones changing as various things are added, taken away to the project. So we've been working to optimize cost in every way we can, and it appears to be generally tracking within budget and timeline.
All right, so next, Brendan mentioned budget is on track. So again, we are fully funded for the project. The total construction cost is about $28 million, and construction dollars spent to date is about $1.4 million. I think there's a breakout that I sent the internal auditor a little less than a month ago in your packet that has about 1.2, so it has gone up a little bit since then. And I have the breakout of spending if anyone's interested after the fact, but it's very similar to those numbers that are in your packet with a little bit more, given that it's been a couple of weeks. Private fundraising efforts are ongoing and going, really well. So hoping we'll be able to share some more exciting updates for you next time we're here on that front.
We also wanted to provide a snapshot into the current spending on the project. As I mentioned, design has been the primary activity carried out thus far, so we thought it was most pertinent to speak to the earned values and the amounts paid for the design portion of the project specifically. So I believe it was added into your packets potentially on Friday, but you will see the estimated earned value for Albert Kahn and Associates is approximately $1.17 million. Thus far, they've been paid $874,000 to date. So we have a variance of approximately 23% or $303,000 that an additional value we've earned beyond what we've paid them thus far.
This slide summarizes our engagement of the local labor groups. The 333 is shown here, but we are engaging all of the membership of the Building Trades Council. Specifically, when a bid pack comes out, it is directly sent to the Building Trades Council for their review and to make sure that we have the best participation we can on the project. Clearly, obviously, builders prevailing wage, builders exchange is another mechanism that we're using to make sure we get market coverage, market saturation in that in those bid packs. Also, Building Trades Council has been very good partners when we don't have the participation that we're looking for. They engage their membership and they really help us out. This is consistent with all the city projects. They're ongoing.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. Councilman Garza has a question.
Thank you, President Cost. Regarding the bidding process for the city of Lansing and our public buildings, is there a reason why we don't have that as a public option to see what the bidding process is, like the state of Michigan is?
I think that, no, to answer your question, I don't think there's a reason why that is not the case. I think we could add that visibility into there.
Yeah, I think for full transparency, I think it would be very helpful to see what the bid specs are like, seeing how, the state of Michigan does it. There's no reason why the city can't.
Builders exchange isn't closed architecture. People could look that way, but it's not as inviting. I think an easierly accessible way to see that. I think it's probably a good thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, just a couple of updated estimates about economic impact of the project. So first, construction economic impact, about $17.5 million estimated for generated income for the local economy, 209 full-time jobs created, and approximately $1.1 million generated in taxes and fees for local government. And then separately, we've broken out the estimated annual ongoing economic impact of the project. So we're estimating about $12.5 million annually generated for the local economy, 159 full-time jobs created, and about $904,000 generated in taxes and fees for local governments annually. And that's all we have, but happy to answer any questions.
I'm going to go Councilman Jackson and then the internal auditor.
Just really quick, Emily, welcome back. And if it's fully funded, then why are you continuing to fundraise? Do you expect there to be some different price or some change in the future?
That's a great question. I think the project is completely fully funded, but we can always make it better, right? Like we got a grant to completely overhaul the sound and lighting to make it a state-of-the-art facility. Things like that we're still actively fundraising for. And then in terms of that, the construction market is so volatile, we don't know what it'll look like in a couple of years. So having a safety net is always a great thing. So, that is why we're fundraising, but for the most part it is, or for the entire part is to make it a state-of-the-art facility, not to make the facility. Does that make sense?
Internal auditor.
Thank you, President Cost. I appreciate you coming up with this earned value. I understand it's part of the design phase. Is there other phases to this project? Is there a timeline? Do you have baseline for things? I mean, how are we going to know the progress going forward as far as, what is going on?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, we're working through plan review at the building department. So once that's finalized, we'll be able to start actually pulling our building permit and commencing the build out at 520, shortly followed by the construction of the 500 South Washington Ovation building itself. Once we get into the construction phase where there's serious dollars being spent on the vertical construction of the building, then it'll be far more appropriate and easier to track the progress of where we are at budgetarily alongside the percentage complete, for example, of the building itself. So I think that's a great way for us to track it once we reach that point in the project.
Could you estimate how many more dollars it's going to take before we get to construction phase?
I think the best snapshot of that would be to take a look basically at the design allocation within Albert Kahn's contract. Their contract is something like $1.4 million in total, of which about $150,000 is allocated to construction administration throughout the construction phase. So we're looking at something like $1.3 million in total expenditure. So, roughly another be $550,000 or so in design expenditures until their design portion of their contract is fully fulfilled and we're going vertical.
Will all of that have to be spent before construction started, or can it be parallel?
Certainly some of it could be parallel. I would say the last portion of that, but primarily it will be invoiced according to the completion of the plan set in full. Typically, once we get to a 99% plan set or something, there'll be some feedback from contractors and things like that lead to the architecture team going back and doing a little bit of revisiting on their plans to incorporate changes at the last minute. But overall, I think we'll get there roughly in accordance with the amounts they've built in at the various phases of their contract allocation.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to your timeline and baseline and everything else.
All right, I have Vice President Carter.
Yes, and I don't think you mentioned this, Emily, but do we even have a time frame of when the actual groundbreaking is regarding versus the construction? I know you mentioned the asbestos and getting all that removed, but is there an actual date set forth for groundbreaking, like shovels in the ground?
I can hand that over to you guys. I mean, I'm happy to answer also, but.
Yeah, we're looking at this spring. We already have received bids back for some of the site demolition at that parcel in front of the 520 South Washington building. So, we're looking at springtime, weather permitting, to begin that site demolition and some of the site preparation activities.
Okay, thank you. And this might be a little bit more premature, but how is the marketing for this going? Do we have anything potentially lined up? Has anyone came in saying they wanted for talent and attraction? How is that looking?
Yeah, so Dom has, who's not here tonight, but I'm sure would be happy to get that to you in writing, has been continuously connecting with all of those people, going to conferences, building those relationships. Booking does not typically take place until about 9 months out. So right now we're still forming relationships, all of that. And then when it gets a little bit closer, probably around over the summer, we'll have some more solid answers to that.
Thank you. And lastly, do you know what the estimate of this would cost to our community for those who want to come to the state-of-the-art building, roughly?
Just to clarify, you mean a ticket price?
Ticket price.
So I don't have an exact answer, but it's very important to us to make sure this is accessible to the entire community. So with that in mind, we're looking at different ticketing options and things like that to make sure that the cost to the consumer is fair and accessible. That's one of our key guiding principles through all of our mindset in building this. So that being said, it will also house the public media center, which is completely open to the public. So that I think will bleed over into the Ovation as well to make sure it's an asset to the entire city of Lansing and surrounding areas, and even people that come to visit.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Vice President Carter. I have a few questions.
Sure.
So I don't see on this list, projects spent to date, at year end, where you're getting paid out of. Are you getting paid by the city or by this project?
I'm an employee of the Lansing Public Media Authority,
Okay.
so it doesn't run through any of the numbers you would see here. It doesn't touch the bond money, anything like that.
Okay, so you're a city employee then?
No, I'm not a city employee. I'm an employee of the Lansing Public Media Authority.
Okay. It's confusing because I think your email's Lansing MI, isn't it?
No, my email address is lansingovation.org.
Okay. I have an old one saved then.
I think it might automatically forward. I'm not sure.
Gotcha. And then spring. I heard spring of 25 was going to be groundbreaking on this. Correct? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. When you say groundbreaking, is it going to be like 2 years ago where we threw some dirt, or are we going to have an actual building going up? Because I've been here 3 years and I've seen the deluxe edition, the super deluxe, and now the one we have in front of us. And I would love to see this project get across the finish line, but it feels like we're not making any progress. I just passed it the other day, and it's still a vacant parking lot. So, I mean, is there going to be actual construction progress when we talk in the spring, or is it going to be more of what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. There's multiple contractors engaged with full bid packs for all of the site work. You'll see the asphalt on the parking lot getting torn out as soon as weather permits, and dirt getting pushed around. So we're excited to get started on the first step in that project, and you'll certainly be seeing meaningful construction.
Great. And then underneath that parking lot, was that tested already, the dirt? Were there samples pulled?
Yeah, there's been multiple environmental reports conducted at various locations along the site as well.
Okay. All right. Councilman Garza.
Thank you, President Cost. Regarding the different contracts, are you able to share any of the contractors who's already under contract now?
We haven't actually signed the contract with a specific contractor, but we have, I believe the RFP for the site work is now closed. So we have the list of the contractors to choose from, which I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, to be honest with you, but I'm sure you'll be hearing of a selection made, if you'd like, as soon as the time comes.
Well, I'll be paying attention. I appreciate that. And, regarding, these slides that you said with all the different economic impact, I hope they're local contractors because, if you hire somebody from Grand Rapids, that money leaves our community as soon as it's spent. So hopefully they're local contractors. Thank you.
Councilman Jackson.
Thank you. I just, I really don't like to do this, but for the comments, like Councilperson Garza, I see that in this slide, it has local 333 plumbers, and it talks about negotiations that's happening. It says labor engagement and bidding. I do realize that you work for them, and I know we're not voting on anything, but maybe, and I asked for this a little while back, but if the city attorney can, kind of give some guidance about what, if anything, can happen, just so there's no appearance, and it's just the appearance that there could be a problem, especially when there's questions about negotiations and there's ongoing negotiations. It's just a concern. I didn't want to bring it up, but I did want to bring it up, so thank you.
City Attorney.
Do you want feedback on that at this time? Or are you asking, is there a possible conflict or appearance of impropriety? Because I can answer that, but if you're asking for something else, I probably need more time.
If you're comfortable answering that.
Yeah, there's none. I will say, as far as I'm aware, Councilmember Garza can correct me if I misunderstand what site work is, but I don't think that anybody's engaging plumbers and pipe fitters for site work at this time. But more importantly, your to your initial phrasing of the question and/or concern, you are correct. There's nothing that the council's voting on, and there is an independent bid and review process that the council does not influence directly. You certainly can indirectly influence it. I think all of you have voiced concerns from time to time about making sure that dollars are spent both wisely and also with an eye towards maintaining, keeping labor in Lansing to the extent that we can. And that's not really a concern with plumbers and pipe fitters or really with any labor unions, but making sure that local people are employed when local dollars are being spent. So there's nothing improper about that. I think that's referenced there probably as a shorthand. So no conflict or improper business throughout this presentation or anything else.
And I guess in the future, should something come up, is that something you would look for, or I or someone else should look for?
Yes, I'll say if I see something that is about to happen that is improper, I will definitely stop it. Hopefully, I would see that beforehand, but also it really, because this body can only take action when it votes, to the extent that any of you can, do anything as elected officials, that's fine individually, but where an impropriety would really come up is if this body were to be voting on something specifically to give money towards any of your employers. And so that applies to any of you. So ideally, I would see that coming well in advance because you have to post your agendas and you have to, draft resolutions in order to take action, draft ordinances in order to take action. So we would see that coming well in advance. And I would probably have a conversation with Councilmember Garza before that even came up. But if not, he or anybody is at any time welcome to raise the concern of a possible conflict of interest.
Thank you. And I mean, it's no offense, I don't suspect anything, but it just seems difficult when the plumbers and pipe fitters does a lot of work on the stuff that we do. So it just seems like a difficult situation to make it appear that there's no problem. But I appreciate that you're looking out for everybody. And thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Jackson. And, I would like to add that we have had, I think, folks up here throughout the years, including now, that have worked at one job or another that somehow has been tied to something here at the city. And I think that we've all been forthright with that, including current members, and been open and said there's a problem. Just as Councilwoman Wood, when she was still here, recused herself from voting on anything that RSVP was getting money from. And I believe that to be true of the members that are sitting up here now, that we would certainly say, hey, this is a problem long before it became, an actual appearance of impropriety. So, Councilman Garza.
Thank you, President Cost, and I appreciate your comments, Councilman Jackson. This was brought up maybe a year ago, and I thought I made myself clear at that point in time. I am the Vice President of Local 333. That is an unpaid position, but my checks come from the Michigan Pipe Trades Association. I'm not out in the field doing work, construction work, so even if one of our contractors from Local 333 were to get the job, I would not be on that job doing any kind of work or collecting any money because of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Garza. Are there any further questions on the ovation update? All right, seeing none, we are going to move on then. Discussion action item E, which is a resolution easement for use of the right-of-way on South Washington and West Lenawee for the Ovation Center for Music and Arts. And who do we have here for this? Oh. Yep, looks like we have Dymaxium here, and they've got the clicker. Good. Floor is yours. And it was Brendan, right?
Brendan, yep.
Okay.
All right, let's dive into this. So this is specifically regarding an Act 33 request for right-of-way encroachments for the Ovation project. To begin, I just want to outline the encroachments that we're specifically discussing here tonight. They are barrier-free ramps both at the existing 520 South Washington building, as well as the primary entrance at the Ovation Center. Additionally, it is a building roof overhang along Washington Avenue and Lenawee Street, as well as a lower roof overhang at the primary entrance at the corner of Lenawee Street and Washington Avenue, as well as the Black Box Theater that is along South Washington Avenue. There are multiple purposes to the decision to design these into the Ovation. The first one being to ensure the facility equitably serves guests through barrier-free access, whether you are attending a show at the Ovation Center or whether you are a patron of the community simply looking to access the Lansing Public Media Center and for all of their services to the public. Additionally, this will optimize the guest experience through offering weather protection as people inevitably wait to enter shows. Unfortunately, being in Michigan, we don't have the luxury of getting to stand out in sunny and 75-degree weather year-round, but hopefully the roof overhangs that have been designed in around the entrances can help benefit the guest experience and provide some protection from the elements on a rainy day. And lastly, to maximize the site's capabilities and offer operational stability for the facility through the incorporation of the Black Box Theater. And the last couple slides of my presentation here are just geared at making what I'm discussing with you all tonight a little more clear. So I've marked up a couple of our renderings here. You'll see on this one you have the barrier-free ramp circled in front of 520 South Washington Avenue, as well as the two multi-level roof overhangs that I'm discussing on the Ovation Center. The top overhang there just wraps the facility and proceeds along Lenawee Street just as it does along South Washington. And lastly, here you have the barrier-free ramps and stairs at the front of the Ovation Center, as well as the Black Box Theater that's designed into the building facade along South Washington. And that is all. Happy to answer any questions you all may have.
We have Councilman Garza.
All right, thank you, President Cost. Just a point of clarity to the city attorney. It says, whereas the Committee on Development and Planning, it should be the Committee of Whole. Committee of the Whole.
I did not draft that portion. I think it was presumed it would go to DMP and it came here. So we will change that after committee.
Any questions? Vice President Carter.
So just humor me for a moment. Is this the final draft design of the Ovation? So in the event there's changes, this easement would be still feasible for this design or a new design? Okay.
Yeah, we're not concerned about any potential, final design changes impacting this easement or these encroachments at all.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, I would entertain a motion.
Yes, I'll make a motion for the resolution of Act 8 on the easement for use of right-of-way on South Washington Avenue and West Lenawee for Ovation Center for Music and Arts.
All right, we have a proper motion in place. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Passes unanimously. I want to thank both of you for being down here tonight, and we look forward to seeing this in the spring. We're going to move on to item F, which is a resolution appointment of Christopher Harkins for the at-large BWL term to expire June 30th, 2028. Chris, are you here? If you want to come on down to the well. Either side. That side's perfect. And then if you could make sure your green light is on, and if you could just give us a brief overview of, we have the application in front of us, but, why you want to serve, that kind of stuff. Just a little brief bio if you could.
Certainly. So good evening. I've had the pleasure of meeting or working with several of you before, but not everyone. So I'll take a few moments to introduce myself. My name is Chris Harkins. I have been a resident of Lansing for nearly 18 years, first purchasing a home in Colonial Village in since then, my wife and I and our son have moved downtown. We love it downtown. We can walk to the ballpark, not on days like today. You know, I fundamentally believe in community and the need to give back to community. I've often served on volunteer boards before within Lansing itself. I was previously on the board for the Habitat for Humanity Capital Region, the Greater Lansing Arts Council, and volunteered for some positions with the Lansing Chamber of Commerce. However, given some of my recent public employment, I stepped back from any sort of roles in board worlds to make sure there were no question about propriety. And so now that I'm no longer in such a public position, I'm interested in getting back into giving back into my community. So I've actually just been appointed to the board of the Michigan League for Public Policy as well as the Michigan History Foundation. And it's not just volunteering, it's something that I've done professionally as well. I currently work at Michigan State. I work in the office of the Senior Vice President and CFO and Treasurer. Before my time at MSU, I spent the last, we'll say 20 some odd years with the state of Michigan in various roles with the legislature and with state departments. My last position was, I had the great honor of serving as Governor Whitmer's budget director. In that role, I was able to oversee the allocation and use of $82 billion for the taxpayers of the state of Michigan. In fact, I felt very comfortable with the presentation earlier and was really keen on some of those OPEB numbers. In fact, my role in that position, I oversaw internal audit functions, I oversaw state accounting, payroll, student data, and it's not a position I took lightly. This is a position where taxpayers trusted me and the governor with good use of taxpayer dollars, making sure that those resources are allocated appropriately, and I take that very seriously. And Councilman, that's a lot of why I'm interested in the position with the Board of Water and Light. I believe that I provide and have shown an ability to work through and work with large, complex organizations, and I believe that I can provide a certain degree of oversight in that sort of similar capacity with the board. When it came to some of the positions I had with the state, again with the budget director position, I was really excited because I got to oversee and help distribute a lot of the COVID dollars that came to the state from the federal government. One of the things I'm most proud of and related to this position is in working with the legislature, I was able to negotiate for over $1 billion to be distributed around the state specifically for clean drinking water, which I believe is foundational for folks in the state of Michigan. BWL obviously serves the whole of the community, and my interest is in making sure the utility is managed well. It's certainly not alone as being a municipal utility, but I believe it is still the largest. And honestly, it's that municipal governance that's important to me. I think it's important to the people of Lansing because it allows for decision-making to be made close to home. And so I'm pleased to try to continue to give back to the community in which I reside. I believe the BWL is a strong organization and is one that I'm eager to try to be a part of, and am happy to take any questions you might have.
I've got Councilman Garza followed by Councilman Jackson.
Thank you, President Koss, and good evening, Mr. Harkins. Thanks for being here this evening. Of course. Appreciate your willingness to serve. Got like a pretty boilerplate question that I always ask everybody that comes in and wants to serve. If you do get appointed to this board, would you be willing to attend the ward constituent contact meetings and share any of the exciting news from the Board of Water and Light Commissioners?
Certainly. I'd be eager to work with you to see that happen.
All right, appreciate that. Well, a couple weeks from now, actually, Adam Hussein and myself have a joint constituent contact meeting, and Dick Peffley will be there to present. So if you do get elected, you're more than welcome to be there with us.
Great. Thank you.
All right, I've got Councilman Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for being here. Sounds like you're a great public servant, a great volunteer, and I know you're a great person. And basically, I I appreciate that you will work well with large organizations and that you're reasonable and that you have good, you hope that the board Water and Light is managed well. However, I think that this board requires a lot of technical, either experience, expertise, or some sort of addition that way, because you may or may not know the board is filled with a lot of nice people that are reasonable and like to see things managed well. But my questions for you are, first, given your, in the last 6 years, it looks like for other experience, Habitat for Humanity, Lansing Chamber of Commerce, Lansing Chamber of Commerce Political Action Committee, Lansing Financial Health Team, and currently on Detroit Fiscal Review Commission, Growing Michigan Together Council, Statewide Risk Committee, and you said you're appointed something else. So do you have the time to gain the expertise for this?
So I'll correct that timeline slightly. First, the answer is yes. But those statewide boards, the Detroit, those were all boards for which I was appointed in my position as budget director. So I no longer serve on those boards. The only boards that the new appointments that I referenced earlier are for the Michigan League for Public Policy, as well as the Michigan History Foundation. Those commitments are quarterly with some additional meetings throughout the year. And so I see that as I do have time and will certainly make time to make this a priority.
Does any of your background or experience have to do with energy production or regulation or microgrids or clean energy or anything like that?
I will admit, Councilman, that my experience is far more on the financial side of things. I have not served as a regulator. I have not had direct operational experience with a public utility. But again, I think my interest and I believe my ability is in those sort of large, complex organizations and ensuring proper monitoring as well as oversight.
Have you read the strategic plans, the last few of them?
I have, in fact. And I think I was looking at the strategic plans last night, some of the financial information again last evening, trying to quickly get up to speed on some of that information. And I'm going to continue to try to do so.
If you're a board person, or in your opinion, who is in charge of the board, Water and Light?
Well, ultimately, the rate payers are the people who are in charge of the Board of Water and Light. I believe the way the governance structure works is that then the Board of Commissioners and then ultimately the reporting structure from there is then, I believe, Dick Peffley reports to that board.
So are you saying that the board is the top in Board, Water and Light?
Well, I'm saying the community itself is the top of that organization.
But within the organization?
Yes, I believe I understand your question. Yes.
Do you know the Board, Water and Light's clean energy goals?
Yes, I've begun to familiarize myself with those. I understand the board's attempt is to get to 50% clean energy by 2030, which is in line with the new statewide goals. Obviously, Board of Water and Light is not regulated quite the same as other public utilities, or rather the non-municipal utilities. Those goals appear fairly aggressive as well, trying to get to, I think, 80% by 2035. But the board has also set the goal of neutrality by 2040, which seems to comport largely with the 2040 goals from the rest of the state.
The state law?
Yes.
And would you support Board, Water and Light changing those goals if the federal administration made it possible?
I think a consistent review of those goals is important, and I think continuing to try to improve and aim aggressively is something that I'd be interested in pursuing. I'd like to understand what goes into making those goals and what makes them achievable, but I also have no problem kind of trying to push for a re-examination from time to time.
You mentioned that the goal is 50% by 2030.
Do you believe that's correct?
I believe it is too. Do you know where they're at now?
The last document that I reviewed indicated that they would be at that amount by 2028, but that was a document that I believe I found last night, and I'd have to be able to go back and check whether that's accurate or not. I believe that was from May of this past year, though.
So is it fair to say that you don't know what renewable output board water is at now compared to the need to be at 50% by 2030?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that I don't have that in front of me at this moment. I believe, based on what I have seen, that they are on track to meet that goal.
Do you know what, if any, projects are planned in the next 5 years to make to the goal?
I did some review based on some of the solar and some of the other the wind operations, but I don't know specifically what those plans are at this point. Again, my intention is to get quickly up to speed on some of that activity that is already planned.
And I think my last question, are you aware of any of the struggles that the Board of Water and Light faces to meet those goals?
Well, I do understand the need for, well, I understand that there are some additional requirements, or rather some additional draw on power that are coming online at certain points in the future. And I understand that there are plans to try to offset that. To a more technical answer, I don't have that information at this point, no.
No problem. And I appreciate you coming, and you know it's nothing personal no matter how I vote.
Certainly
But I have, if the history is similar to the past, or if the future is like the past, this might be the last time actually we get to talk like publicly where you're saying your opinion about things, because a lot of the board members are relatively reserved when it comes to outwardly expressing what their thoughts and opinions in the process was. So I appreciate your willingness to do so today.
Certainly.
Thank you, Councilman Jackson. Do we have anything further? Councilmember Penny Vonnegut.
Thank you, President Cost, and thank you, Mr. Harkins, for being here this evening. And again, thank you for wanting to dedicate your time to the Board of Water and Light. You made a statement a few moments ago that ultimately the ratepayers are in charge of the utility. Recently, we've heard publicly that the ratepayers felt that they didn't have a voice with the last rate increase. And I understand there's a formula that goes into that, and it's fairly complex. But if confirmed to serve on this board, would you commit to not only attending the constituent meetings that Councilman Garza raised, but also taking in information and letting residents know that they've been heard by you as a board member?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think it's really important to make sure that that there's open dialogue. If I can use an example from my past, one of the things we did when I was budget director is we would release the governor's budget, and then I'd go around the state to hear what we got right and what we got wrong. And then from that, I would, in some instances, changed kind of what we were trying to accomplish because we heard both positive and negative feedback. And so I'm very much interested in receiving feedback. I'm very much interested in making sure folks understand how I arrive at decisions. And so I don't see that changing in this capacity at all.
All right. Vice President Carter.
All right, I will make a motion for the resolution appointment of Christopher Harkins at large member, Lansing Board of Water and Light, term to expire June 30th, 2028.
We have a proper motion in place. Is there any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Oh, I'm sorry. Passes 7-1. Sir, we will be voting on this later tonight. If you stick around, the clerk can swear you in at that time. Yep. Thank you. Next, we have a resolution, the appointment of Shelby Frere, at-large member of Lansing Entertainment and Public Facilities Authority Board of Commissioners, LEFA, term to expire June 30th, 2025. I believe Shelby's in the audience if you want to come on down. Again, good to see you.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It looks like you know how to sit there, and
It's much more fun in the audience. But
yeah. So I will. You heard the questions, and kind of, if you give us just your background, we're all pretty familiar with you, but I will
Sure.
give you the floor.
thank you for having me tonight. Shelby Freyer, for those that I haven't worked with, which I think is most of everyone. I've been in finance and operations the last 20 years or so in both schools and cities in the state of Michigan, Department of Treasury. Was asked to serve on this board for LEPA, and very happy to do so. I think serving our community is always the right thing to do if time allows. So I'm happy to be asked and happy to join.
All right. Do we have any questions for Shelby? Councilman Garza.
Thank you, President Cost. Good evening, Shelby. Good to see you. My same question I asked to Mr. Harkins earlier. If you are appointed to this board, would you be willing to attend some of the constituent contact meetings and share some of the exciting information that the LEPA board has to provide?
Yep, absolutely. Anytime.
Okay. And other question is, you said, I heard you say, if time allows. So this is my concern. You came to the city, you left the city, you came back, you left again. You weren't able to join us during council in the evenings. How are we going to be sure that you're committed to serve on this board and be at those meetings?
Well, I think schedule is important. I have kids and a day job, so I think as long as I know things are coming, it's easy for me to get those things on the calendar that I prioritize and make my time for. So I'm happy to be here.
Okay. And you said that you were asked to, this isn't something that you wanted to do on your own? Who
I was
actually
notified of the vacancy, I should say.
Okay. All right. I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Okay, Vice President Carter.
I'm sorry, I just had one question.
Oh.
And I might have missed it because I had to step out for a second. I see Lansing Entertainment and Public Facilities is your first option. You may have already addressed it, but I also see Economic Development Corporation, Downtown Lansing Inc., and Capital Area Transportation Authority. Can you give me the why on what that was the first option for you?
That was the board that had the vacancy, but also willing to serve on other boards if needed. That was in the application. There are several drop boxes of the boards that you need to select, so that was the priority order that I selected for my application.
Thank you.
All right, so Vice President Carter again.
All right. I motion to approve the resolution appointment for Shelby Freyer, at-large member, Lansing Entertainment and Public Facilities Authority Board of Commissioners, term to expire June 30th, 2025.
Okay, we have a proper motion in place. Is there any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose?
Nay.
Passes 6-2.
Thank
All
you.
right, so same deal. You'll be on for City Council tonight if you want to stick around to get sworn in if you do pass. We will be starting City Council in just a few minutes.
Thank you.
Yep. Is there anything else? Seeing none, we are adjourned at 6:58. 7.